Maybe you're actually wondering what separates the amateurs from the professionals when it comes to insurance producers. What's the big difference maker between those who have, say, maybe a $200,000 or $300,000 book of business versus those that have $1 million or more? What are some of the things insurance producers do when they're having great success, and what are some of the things they stop doing or don't do any longer in order to achieve that success? You see, I actually think there are a number of things, and we're just going to count them up, just a few handful that we're going to look at today. But there are some things that I truly believe separate the professionals from the amateurs. What are those actual things? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in today's podcast episode of the Millionaire Insurance Producer Podcast. Stay tuned. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Millionaire Insurance Producer Podcast. My name is Charles Specht, and I'm your host, and I'm grateful that you are listening. Today, we're going to talk about what separates the winners from the losers. You don't want to be a loser insurance producer, do you? Of course you don't. You want to be a winner. You want to be able to set the appointments that you want to set. You want to be able to get the people who are your prospects to give you the things that you want. You don't want to become the honesty cop. You don't want to just be used in order to give quotes to prospects. You want to actually get in contact with those who want to do business with you. And that's what we're trying to talk about today. We're trying to talk about how to set appointments with those who want to do business with you, and specifically how to turn them or transition them into not just prospects, but people who are signing on the dotted line with you, paying their premium, and therefore you are making a commission. We want to talk about the do's and don'ts of being a successful insurance producer. And so let's get into it in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to let you know that we're going to be having our next Permission Producer School coming up likely the week of February 16th here in 2026. So the week of February 16th, 2026, go to permissionproducerschool.com to learn a little bit about it and get registered for the next cohort. Permission Producer School is where I teach insurance agents how to build a $1 million or more book of business by taking a look at the 5 sections, the 5 steps of the permission sales framework. So, permissionproducerschool.com, February 16th. Now, when we talk about actually what separates insurance producers from being amateurs versus pros, is that I do believe that there has to be a transition in regards to our career. We can't continue to do what we did when we were first starting out in order to build a book of business. So before we talk about the things that maybe you should do, I want to talk about the things you should not do. The things you should not do when you're trying to be a successful insurance producer could be a lot of things. But some of the main things that I want to talk about are you prospect differently. Look, here's the truth of it. When an insurance producer starts his or her career, you're kind of thrown into the lion's den. You are told that you are now on staff. You maybe have a cubicle or an office, and they expect you to actually figure this stuff out. And so you have to go out there and you have to write business. And because maybe you're starting in the insurance business when you're still sort of new, you're just out of college, you're fresh out of college, maybe a couple of years out of it, whatever, you still don't have a lot of experience. You might even look like you're about 19 years old. And so you kind of have sort of a smaller, closed mindset in regards to what you think that you can do. In fact, I actually think this happens more often than not because most insurance producers out there are working for small or medium-sized agencies and not necessarily the very large alphabet houses that put a whole bunch of restrictions on you and what type of business you're going to go after. And so because most insurance producers are at small and medium-sized agencies, they tend to write whatever those agencies are going to be okay with, which tends to be anything. And so these newer producers tend to write anything, which means that you write small. This is a problem. This is a problem because when you write small accounts, you don't make big commissions. Obviously, they're paying less for premium. You make a commission and you're just making less money. Well, it's usually because that's what the people at your agency have been doing. That's the kind of business that your agency writes, and therefore that's what you write. And so how do these producers, these younger producers who are sort of zero to say $300,000, well, they're getting on the telephone and they're dialing for numbers. They are maybe sending emails. They're trying to figure out social media. They're doing a whole bunch of stuff. but I would say they're dialing for dollars. They're trying to figure out email marketing. They're trying to figure out social media. They might be sending out a whole bunch of direct mailers. They're just doing things like that. I don't see the bigger, more advanced, successful insurance producers doing that. They're sort of past the time of trying to do it all by themselves and get it all done. Why? What do I mean by that? Well, here is one main thing that I actually think separates the amateurs from the pros in the biggest way. In fact, if anybody ever asks me, Charles, what do you think is the primary differentiator between a successful insurance producer who's got a large book of business that is seasoned versus somebody else? I'll say this. They typically work off referral. They have centers of influence who refer business to them. They have clients that refer business to them. They know people who refer business to them. That is by far and away the biggest thing that I see out there in the insurance business when it comes to the difference between a seasoned, successful producer and a newer producer trying to figure it out, is that newer producers who aren't quite successful yet are trying to drum up the business themselves, whereas the seasoned producer is working towards relationship, working towards a center of influence, working toward referrals, testimonials, things like that. That's the difference, because at the end of the day, the beginning part of selling insurance is a numbers game, setting appointments and so forth, things like that. But insurance is really a relationship business at the end of the day. Your relationships with underwriters and specifically your relationship with business owners, these prospects. It's a relationship business. You win clients based upon relationship, but you set appointments for the most part based upon numbers, definitely at the beginning of your career rather than at the end of it. So that's definitely something that I see. Now, there is a sort of, it's a not a close second necessarily, but it's a distant second, but it is an important second. And that is this. I do not see successful insurance producers who have a matured book of business, closer to $1 million rather than zero. I don't see those producers just going through a normal blind quoting process anymore. They don't do it. They are typically much more focused on the type of business and the process or system that they put into place. They work off of a broker of record letter process rather than a blind quoting process. Now, a lot of insurance producers, maybe like yourself, don't necessarily have that luxury to be able to just do that rather than just throwing mud against the wall to see what sticks. And I think that's a problem. I'm sad to hear that. But I actually think that happens more often than not. You want to hear kind of an example of why I say that? So an agency owner reached out to me about a month or so ago, maybe a month and a half or so ago. And he was saying that he is looking to bring on a sales trainer or a coach for him and his agency. And so, but he said, Charles, I'm going to be contacting a few different trainers to interview them and see what would be a good fit. I'm like, sure, that's no problem. Let's meet. I'll tell you what I do, and we'll see if it's a good fit going forward. And so I met with him. We went over Zoom. I sent him some information on exactly what I do, that it's predominantly focused on gaining the permission of the insurance buyer, and so forth. And then he went on vacation, Christmas happened and all that kind of stuff. I just reached out to him and said, hey, what's going on? Where are you kind of at in this process? And he said, well, I want to let you know, I just decided to hire a coach. And I said, and it wasn't you. And I said, okay, well, who was it? Let me know who it was. He gave me the name, hadn't heard of this person before. So I just did a little bit of Google research, and it's a non-insurance person who really doesn't understand insurance. And I said, hey, no problem. I'm totally okay with that. Can I just ask maybe what was the reason, the deciding factor that you chose not me and somebody else? And he said, well, the biggest issue is that we don't do broker of record letters. It's not really a part of our process. And I thought, that's good. I'm glad he did not choose me because it would not have been a good fit. His thought process was, we just need to figure out how to get people to do business with us and choose our quotes more than really going after the jugular, really going after the win. We want to set more appointments and throw more mud against the wall to see what sticks. And hopefully we will get more people who actually say yes rather than no. And you know what? More power to him. Hope the best for him. I think he chose unwisely. Not that he didn't choose me. I don't care about me necessarily. I think that he chose unwisely because he's stuck going down the road of the stale, male, pale industry of the insurance industry, that this is how we have always done it. And because this is how we have always done it, we're not necessarily looking at new ways of doing it. I think that's a problem. I have a number of insurance agency owners now who are reaching out to me, and we're putting into place lead generation machines for their agency where leads are coming in, whether we are outsourcing the appointment setting, whatever we're doing, but we are bringing in leads, and we're kind of even making a little bit of a transition to not as many producers, but more even inside sales, because the hit ratio just works so much better. It's just different. It's not necessarily how every agency needs to do it, but that's how some are doing it. And so I would just tell you that, yes, I see seasoned producers who are working more in referral, but I also see them where they are just working on broker of record letter, and that's it. If they get referred into somebody, I would tell you almost 100% of the time, you never quote. You only get the broker of record letter. If you were to ever bow down to the quoting process after giving a referral, you've already lost all the mojo that you had in that referral from the first place. You've basically just said, yep, I know somebody, but now I'm just going to put myself in the bucket of being very mediocre. And so I'm just going to bow down to the quoting process. And I would say, don't ever do that when you are referred. But when it comes to these two initial don'ts, don't just work on, drumming up your own business, build relationships over the course of time so that people are referring you in. And then two, don't go through a quoting process any longer. Just put a line in the sand saying, this is what we do. This is how we offer our services. This is what our process looks like. Sign on the dotted line and we will bring forth the best options for you. But we just don't go through a quoting process any longer. That's what I see. I see those as the big differentiators when it comes to the most successful producers in regards to what they don't do any longer. Now, a little bit of a transition now. I want to talk about what I do see that the most successful producers do. And obviously, it's going to be focused on the broker of record letter, because this is permission. This is what I think insurance producers want. They want somebody that trusts them. And I do believe at the end of the day that insurance buyers don't want to have to go through a quoting process. It's just that they don't know who to choose. They don't know who to select. They don't understand in the insurance business. And so if we can give them a process so that they can see the end result works for them, and then we explain to them that the way in which to get this end result is to assign us the markets that we want so that we can get this thing taken care of for you, they are much more likely to say yes and pull the trigger. So first and foremost, work by broker of record letter, period. You will save a lot of time not having to waste time going through a quoting process. Now, the broker of record letter process works beautifully for an employee health benefits producer. I would say about maybe 30 to 35% of my clients are health benefits producers. The remainder tend to be commercial P&C. And it's beautiful. EB, almost all the carriers take it. They will take it midterm. They will actually even pay that producer the very next month, even though the group hasn't renewed, for 7 months down the line. It's beautiful how it works. It just doesn't work like that in P&C, and you know it. Sometimes it doesn't work very well at all. Yet, sometimes it does. Sometimes all the moons align and the broker of record letter works beautifully. But there's a lot of times in which it doesn't. However, I would tell you that in every single first meeting with a prospect, literally, listen to me, every first meeting with a prospect, you should ask for the signed broker of record letter, either for the current carriers that they have or for every single market that you want. Why? Because it, my friends, is going to tell you everything you need to know about where you're at right now in the relationship with this insured, but more specifically, what kind of relationship the incumbent agent has with their client. Because if you go through this entire process, which I kind of talk about and outline in the Permission Sales Framework, by the way, remember, Permission Producer School, in the Permission Sales Framework, I outline this process on what you should be doing in that first appointment. Because if you uncover a bunch of problems, present your solutions, ask for the business, and they say no, you have learned so much about where you're at in this process. So ask for the broker of record letter. Now, again, it gets muddy on P&C. Sometimes you might not have access to the carrier. or the carrier. Sometimes it insures with 3, 4, 7 different insurance carriers, and maybe you have access to like half of them, or maybe only a few of them will actually accept it. Well, you got to start making a business decision here on what's in the best interest for you and what's in the best interest for the insured. You have to position yourself. Winning is about positioning. You have to position yourself for victory. So if that doesn't work out in regards to the current markets, sometimes it doesn't, many times it does. It's beautiful. Always ask for it. But the second thing is that you should at least be asking for the markets that you want to represent going forward. So here's an example. Let's just say, and I could use any insurance carrier, ABC insurance carrier, okay? The insured is with ABC insurance carrier. Maybe you don't have access to ABC insurance carrier. Maybe you do, but they don't accept broker of record letters. Whatever the issue, they're with ABC and you can't get it. Maybe the insured even says, look, Charles, I really appreciate you coming in and doing quotes for me. And I really like what you've shown here. My agent hasn't done a terrible job, but they haven't done a great job either. Like, I would be willing to make a switch to you if we can get a good product, and save some money and get your services going forward. I'd pull the trigger. Look, I get it. I don't have a problem with the insured saying that. You know what? And that's the kind of client I want. That's exactly the kind of client I want. So if I feel like I can get to it based upon the carriers that I know that I need, I'm probably going to move forward on the account. We'll put some barriers in place, but I'll probably move forward on that account because that's the kind of client I want. Now, even if you can't get or don't want to ask for the current market, you absolutely should. If you're an EB agent, you should ask for the current market because that's going to tell you a lot. For PNC, maybe not the current market, but at least the markets that you need. Because here's the thing. If you're micro-niched, and that's a term I came up with like maybe, a decade, 15 years ago, micro-niched. You're not just sort of broad, but you're very focused on where you're at, micro-niche. If you are micro-niched, you will already know which carriers are actually the competitive carriers for that segment. You're going to know there's probably just 2, 3, maybe 4 that are actually competitive. And so there just really ain't no reason for you to go through a quoting process if you don't have access to the markets that you need in order to be competitive. So when you are sitting down with an insured and they're with likely one of the carriers that are those sort of carriers, if you're looking at it and say, let's just say there's 4 carriers, okay? And the insured's with one of them. I might say to the insured, I'm willing to go forward if I can get access to these other 3. I need to have access to these other 3 carriers for me to really move forward here. And the insured can have the current market. They can work with the current carrier because the current carrier is going to likely try to be competitive. And there's hundreds of other carriers out there that maybe the insured, your other agent can work with. But I need these 3. And so if the insured says, that's fine, I'll do that. I'll give you those 3 because I think that you've got a pretty good process here. I would likely move forward. I'm still going to work on a few other things in order to position myself as some sort of safety barriers here, but that's what I want. I want those 3. Okay. I want those 3. And this is kind of like where the rubber meets the road. Based upon what the insured says about me getting those carriers will tell me whether I'm going to move forward or I'm going to push the pause button. I'm not going to push the stop button. I'm not going to burn the bridge, but I might pause for the year and just not move forward. I'm not going to ruin the relationship, but I might pause and just say, you know what, this really isn't a good opportunity for us here. I feel like you're going to be, just in maybe a good place with your current agent. You obviously trust your current agent. That's okay. I just might push the pause button for this year. Well, here's the thing. If the insured says something like this, if they're with ABC and I say, I need these other 2 or 3 carriers, if the insured says something like, well, Charles, I appreciate that. I'm going to ask my current agent which markets they're going to, and then, I'm going to see which ones they want. And I may or may not give you those, or I'm just going to let, the insured, rather my agent, kind of pick the ones they want. Well, for me, that's good to know. I mean, that's really good to know because there's really no reason to move forward if they're not going to give me the carriers that I know I need in order to be competitive, right? Why would we move forward? There's literally no reason to move forward. This is why I'm saying asking for the broker of record letter, either the current plan or the current carriers, or at least the carriers that you want in order to be competitive. It tells you everything you need to know about where you're at in this process. And by the way, I wouldn't even be asking for those particular carriers until I'm towards the end of the first meeting where I've already been asking open-ended questions, pushing the conversation towards the broker of record letter ask, where I've uncovered a bunch of problems. I've shown them how I fix those problems, and now I'm going for the ask. I ask for the carriers that I want, and if they say no, now that I've uncovered a bunch of problems, now that I've shown them how I fix the problem, now that I've even explained what the intended outcome is once we kind of take over the process, and if they still say no, no reason to go forward. Pause button. Because they are basically saying they don't want to take this away from the current agent. I've learned simply by me asking how strong of a relationship that agent has. Now listen, this happens all the time. Insurance buyers will meet with agents to get quotes all the time with almost no desire whatsoever to leave their current agent. Can you believe it? Absolutely. That's how it works. They really have no plans on leaving their current agent, but they'll meet with you to get quotes. They'll use you. You can be the honesty cop. They'll pat you on the head and say, good job. Really liked what you saw. Come back again next year. And we're going to give this a real good shot. Maybe get in contact with me a little bit earlier. And all they're doing is just patting you on the back and just kind of like pushing you out the door. Thank you very much for doing exactly what I wanted to do. Yeah, happens all the time. Now, I will also tell you that you kind of have to babysit the conversation a little bit because the insured doesn't understand what's in his or her best interest. They don't understand how the insurance business works. And so it's your responsibility, Mr., Mrs., Miss Insurance Agent, it's your responsibility to be transparent with the insured to help them to see what gets them the best deal, how to get the best end result after all said and done. They don't understand many times about first in blocks the markets, or that if we bring in an extra competitor behind the scenes, we might end up getting a better deal. There's a lot of different things that come into play with regards to positioning, but here's like a beautiful secret. Okay. I'm going to tell you a secret right now. Okay. I'm going to tell you a secret. So listen up. This is how the secret works. Let's say that there are those 4 carriers in that example. They're with ABC. You already know they're with them. Or at least you have a pretty good idea there's these 4. Every time you are micro-niched, you are in a stronger position already because you know which carriers are the competitive ones. Okay? Even if you don't have access to one out there, you know it's competitive. That's okay. Every single time you set a first appointment in order to meet with a prospect, you need to contact, I would say call them up. Call up the underwriters and say, hey, I'm just giving you a call to see whether or not you've already received a submission on this particular account because I just want to know even if I've got a shot here. I want to be able to work with you, but I just need to know whether or not it's already been submitted. They'll usually tell you that. I mean, they're not going to tell you who submitted it, but they'll tell you if they've already received a submission. Well, this is good information to know. And they might even tell you, they say, yeah, no, we haven't received one yet, but in fact, we haven't received a submission on that account in the last 3 years. Ooh, that's good to know, especially if you know they've been competitive. Oh, now we're getting some information. Or they might say, you know what? Yeah, we've actually received that over the last 4 years now. We've issued quotes 2 or 3 times, and we've never gotten the business. The underwriter might even say, we don't really feel like we've been getting a real fair shot on that account because the agent's just trying to keep it with ABC Insurance Carrier, and so we just haven't really been getting a fair shake. That's good to know. Can you use that when you speak to your insured about why you should be the one to represent that particular insurance carrier going forward? I think so. So this information is important, and you're not going to know it unless you're micro-niched, and you're not going to know it unless you know which carriers you need in order to be competitive, and you're not going to know it unless you do the pre-diligence beforehand to make sure the account has not been submitted. Why is this also important? Because of this. Let's say at least the agent's doing a decent job by getting the account out to market. Okay. And usually that's the servicing team and not the producer. But let's just say, you're probably meeting with the insured 50 days beforehand. So it's likely the agent has already gone out to market. And if you know that those 4 carriers are the ones who are competitive and you contact them and they each say, yeah, we've actually received a submission on this, or maybe 3 out of the 4 have received a submission on it. Well, you kind of know this is a broker of record letter thing or nothing. This is it. They've already been submitted. And so you don't have an opportunity to waste time gathering loss runs, putting together a submission, get it out to the marketplace, and then boom, you're blocked, right? So now you know when you get into this appointment, you must get a signed broker of record letter or it's a pause. It's a pause. And you need to have this information in that first meeting. Otherwise, you are wasting time. And then to put together a whole submission, send it out to the marketplace, then get notified by the carriers you've been blocked, and then to eventually go back to the insurance buyer and say, hey, I've been blocked here and I want to try and work on some of these accounts. So can you give me a few carriers? I mean, it just screams amateur. And you don't want that. You want to separate yourself. You want to do the due diligence. You want to do what needs to be done in order to separate yourself from your competition. This is about positioning. Sales is about relationship. This is war. War. And you got to win. If you don't win, you're going to starve. You got to be able to win accounts in order to get commission, period. And you're not going to be able to pay your bills unless you win some accounts. So let's take this thing seriously. This is your professional career. You need to be able to do this in order to get the things that you want. Otherwise, you're just going to get rolled. You're going to get used. You will become the honesty cop in this whole process, and you don't want that. So, what makes insurance producers successful versus those that don't? The successful producers do this. I'm telling you, they do this. They are micro-niched. They know which insurance carriers are needed in order to win the business. They ask the underwriters this. Remember when I said this business is a relationship game? It's not just relationship with the insured. It's also relationship with your underwriters, your markets, your carriers. Do you take care of them? Or do they see you as somebody that just blocks the markets? Do you have a high hit ratio with them? What is it? Those relationships are important to you as well as the agency. But this is a relationship business at the end of the day. And if you don't have relationships, you're going to starve. You're going to starve. You're going to flat out starve. Or you're going to get fired. One of the two. And neither of those are really good. None of those are really good. You want to be able to win. So those producers who are successful, they do get lots of accounts by referral, centers of influence. They don't go through a quoting process anymore. They go after the broker of record letter. What you need to do is BOR the current plan or ask for the markets that you know you need in order to be competitive. And then finally, if you're going to go through that quoting process, you need to get a couple of things just to make sure that you are putting the guardrails around the whole process so that you don't get used. Again, positioning, positioning, positioning. That first thing is get the markets that you want. If they agree to give it to you, great. That's a check mark. Cool. Moving on. Second thing is you need to have a really thorough conversation with the insured about what exactly you have to accomplish in order to be guaranteed the win. And by that, I mean they will agree not to renew with their current agent and they will renew with you. What is it that you have to accomplish in regards to premium savings? That's what it usually comes down to as far as the insurance buyer is concerned, because they don't understand everything else. So when they say, you got to accomplish this, great. I also have my services here. We're going to do this, A, B, and C. If we can agree to A, B, and C, I'll be willing to move forward with you. I think that we can accomplish those things. So you have to have a very thorough conversation with the insured on exactly what needs to be accomplished. And I would say that you're usually probably going to end up somewhere between 5 and 10%. Like I would say just like 5% savings. If I can achieve a 5% savings along with my services and so forth, will you agree to move forward with me? And I would say 99% of the time, you should be able to accomplish that if you know the carriers and the markets. That shouldn't be a problem for you, okay? When you've got the right relationships with the underwriters and so forth, that should not be a problem for you. So you have to have that from the insured. You're going to put it in writing, but you have to have that. The last thing out of those three is that, okay, you get the markets you want. They agree to give you the business if you can accomplish a certain price savings or whatever it is you agree to. And then third, they must agree not to share your quote with the other agent or any other agents. They just have to agree not to share your quote with the other agent or the incumbent agent. We're going to try and get quotes from the insured. If there are other quotes out there, great. But they have to agree not to verbally share your numbers, not to send over the proposal that you give, any of your quotes. They're not going to share that information with the incumbent agent or any other agents. It's just going to be really hard for you to get the second one, which is that premium savings, if they're sharing your numbers. And once you kind of have that conversation about the ethics behind it, I actually think most of the insurance buyers are going to get it. They're going to agree that that actually makes sense. And so by asking for it, you're again differentiating yourself. You're putting yourself in a strong position. This is what you need to do, my friends, in order to be successful. This is what the producers do that are successful. Why? Because they've gone through this process enough. They have been used before. They don't like that, and so they tweak it. They don't do that kind of stuff anymore. It's just one of the things that separates those who are highly successful versus those who are still like trying to get it all figured out. That's it. You do that, you're going to have great success. That's what highly successful insurance producers do and don't do. So the question then is, what are you going to do going forward? That's a great question. And I guess maybe one of the first answers would be go to permissionproducerschool.com and check out the next cohort that we're going to be doing in February of Permission Producer School. Get signed up, get registered. Ask your agency leadership to pay for it. It's not going to be that much. Ask them to pay for it. It's going to help you win more business and bring in a whole lot more clients. And if you are agency leader, you should send your people to the Permission Producer School so that they can learn how to set more appointments, win more broker of record letters, win more through a quoting process. It's going to help you out. It's going to make your agency a whole lot more profitable. I have clients that send their producers through it. I have clients that even send their account managers through it who have any kind of inbound leads that are coming in. It's going to help them become a much better closer. permissionproducerschool.com. The next cohort is coming up in February. Get registered before I have to close doors because I can only allow a certain number of people in. permissionproducerschool.com. My name is Charles Specht. I am the host here of the Millionaire Insurance Producer podcast, where I teach and train insurance agents just like you how to build a $1 million or more book of business through signed broker of record letters. Have a wonderful day, my friends. Take care.